one of the big pioneers was Royal Rife with his amazing, incredible microscope, the Rife microscope that he invented. And this was back at the turn of the century. Most of his work was done in the 20s and 30s. But he made a microscope that was, for the first time, able to see bacteria and even viruses. And then he used vibrational frequency techniques in order to resonate the virus like a wine glass and intentionally overdose that until the wine glass shattered. So he was finding the frequencies for harmful bacteria and harmful viruses and exploding them with sound waves by intentionally overdosing them with sound. The same thing that you would see with a wine glass when it shatters when you sing the right note. This device that he created made all kinds of headlines and news, and his cancer treatments were spreading, being broadcast all over the United States, and then in Europe he was being discovered for his work with particularly cancer. You can see this was in 1931, this little date here. And he was right here in San Diego, where I am. Super microscope gives the first view of filtered bacteria. Instrument praised as new aid to science. Local man bears the wonders of germ life by visualizing bacteria and germs through this microscope and then resonating them with sound waves. Here's some of his different devices. He had whole laboratories full of these devices. Dread disease germs destroyed by rays, claims of a San Diego scientist. Cancer blow seen after 18-year toil by Rife. Some of his microscope photographs, and he even had films, cine, they called it, cinemascope city. Then, of course, when he got too famous, particularly with cancer, the AMA stepped in and the pharmaceutical companies behind them and destroyed him completely, branded him a quack. They came in and they destroyed his microscopes. They burned his papers, so not much remains except for what friends and relatives could steal away and hide. So all of this work was lost, and was only 60, 70, 30, 40, 50, 60, 50 years later that they were able to begin to reproduce what he had done with electron microscopes, these images of bacteria. And now electron microscopes have only just recently been able to visualize viruses. So a huge amount of work lost. And he's not the only one. You have to remember that there's a sort of a war going on about the idea, a war of ideas about what is health, what is disease, and what do you do about it. And it's basically the allopathic approach on the one hand, where we manage symptoms. And the belief is that germs cause disease, therefore we give medications to kill the germs. And a holistic idea that believes that germs don't cause disease, they are opportunistic invaders that take advantage of a situation where your own body's defenses become weakened for some reason. So your body is the key, and the healing forces in your body are the only thing that does any healing at all. So that's the kind of the idea between those two forces. Here down here you can see some of what was being done with him, with destroying with sound waves various bacteria. Then there was Robert Monroe, and he started out as a broadcast in the broadcast industry, radio. So he had a lot of on-the-ground practical knowledge about sound. But he had these remarkable out-of-body experiences that he started to have, and he wrote a couple of books about that. Journeys Out of the Body was one of the big ones. And he established an institute called the Monroe Institute, because people who were reading his book were beginning to write him and call him, wanting to know if he could help them to learn how to go out of the body. So he started holding workshops and seminars. And then the article in Scientific American came out, the one that I had talked about before in one of these live broadcasts. And that was the work of Gerald Oster, who published his work in Scientific American in October 1973. And that's where he did the experiments that proved brainwave entrainment using sounds pulsing at a brainwave speed. Your brainwaves will lock on to the speed of that sound, and in order to do so, your brainwaves would slow down from wherever they were to get to this external sound pulse and lock onto it. That was called the frequency following response, brainwave entrainment, which means that we could entrain your brainwaves from wherever they are to someplace else and change your state of consciousness in that process. Pretty much what the shamanic drumming had been doing for centuries before, pounding the drum at a brainwave speed, creating an external cue for your brainwaves to change from where they were down to that other cue and change your consciousness in the process. So Monroe reads this article in Scientific American and immediately begins to think, what if I could use this brainwave entrainment thing to entrain people's brainwaves to the state that I go to when I leave my body, so I could help me to train people to get out of their body. So he hired a EEG researcher named Justine Owens, who I know personally, who's a friend of mine. She was instrumental in getting me part of the NIH grant process at the University of Virginia Medical School, where I was flown in to be the expert in setting up the binaural beat brainwave entrainment portion of that NIH grant for a sleep study, to see if we could change mood, if we could change sleep patterns with external entrainment for people who had pathological disorders of sleep. I also had other institutes, sleep research institutes, do that same kind of study. In particular, the Royal Ottawa Sleep Research Center in Canada did a study with pathologic sleep disorders with one of my soundtracks, one of my generic soundtracks, the Delta Sleep System, and that showed a 95% effective ability to cure pathological sleep conditions. We're not just talking about regular insomnia. Anyway, back to Monroe. So she sets up an EEG lab, and she hooks him up to the EEG monitors and watches what happens to his brainwaves when he goes out of the body experiences. And then he's able to start using whatever brain frequency shows up for him as an entrainment vehicle for people who then start coming to his workshops at the Monroe Institute. And he begins to, and he calls his technique Hemi-Sync, after the idea that we can synchronize the hemispheres when we have headphones on. So with the use of headphones with Gerald Oster, we could use these binaural beats slightly out of tune that force the two hemispheres to talk to each other, to compare notes, to see if this odd phenomenon of one ear hearing what the other ear doesn't hear, a new phenomenon in nature, if that's a threat. Forces the hemispheres to synchronize to see if it's a threat. And when they do that, they initiate this sound pulse out of nowhere that the brain is creating, and then I entrain myself to that. An active brain process.